Good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. And if I can, I'd like to take the time to call this meeting to order. There's so much room here tonight. For those of you that are new, I just wanted to take one administrative note. I was asked to remind you that when you do get recognized and you do come to the mic to speak, if you would please give your name and your district number. Rumor has it a lot of those have changed, and we want to make sure we get the right district numbers with everybody. With that, if I could ask the clerk to call the roll.
Peter Ambrose. Here. Ed Bateson. Here. Mary McCullough. Here. Keith Varian. Here. Bill Gerber. Here. Tim Lynch. Here. Eric Newman. Here. Cindy Perham. Here. Heather Dean. Present. Alex Durrell. Here. Alexis Harrison. Here. Robin Orris. Here. Julie Gottlieb. Here. Jen Hochberg. Here. Phil Pierce. Here. Liz Esma. Here. Josh Garskoff. Ruth Smay. Here. Carol Way. Here. Jay Wolk. Here. Matt Ambrose. Here. Hannah Gale. Here. Ray Newberger. Here. Janice Solomon. Here. Tom McCarthy. Here. Mark McDermott. Here. Jill Vergara. Here. Karen Wackerman. Here. Hank Ferentz. Here. Pamela Iacono. Here. Christine Messina. Here. Peter Tallman. Here. Brian Farnan. Here. Drew Georgiadis. Here. Ken Lee. Here. Bill Perugini. Here. Sam Cargill. Paul Fatabine. Here. Michael Hurley. Here. Eric Sunman. Here.
Are we good to go? In line with the formation of a new RTM, it seemed appropriate to have two of our longer-term representatives, Representative Smay and Representative Peter Ambrose, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. She's coming, I think. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first order of business is to elect a moderator and a deputy moderator for the coming year. May I have a nomination for moderator? Representative McCarthy. All right. Is there a second? All right. I see a second. Mr. Representative Pierce. Any other nominations for moderator? All right. Seeing none, are we ready to vote? All right. All in favor of Representative Iacono for moderator, please raise your hands. That's good. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Ms. Iacono. You want me to do the deputy too? Okay. The mysterious people who tell people these things. All right. May I have a nomination for deputy moderator? Representative McCarthy? All right. Is there a second? Representative Durrell. Thank you. Any further nominations for deputy moderator? Any further discussion? Are we ready to vote? All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, those are the two ways we do it. It's pretty cool. You guys picked that up right away. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Representative Ferris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have one housekeeping matter that I need to settle before we get started. per the town clerk, and that's to remind everybody that you received the standards of conduct in your packet. Please make sure, I'm not going to read this into the record. Please familiarize yourself with it. If you didn't get a copy, please see Betsy and we can get you a copy. And you also received notification on the Connecticut Freedom of Information Act. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about that? I also have one request from the Fair TV broadcast. The use of cell phones, Wi-Fi, even 3G, running any of your iPads or cell phones greatly interferes with the microphones for the TV. So if you could completely power down your iPads, cell phones, tablets, that would be much appreciated. I'm just asking as a courtesy. It's not a requirement, but it would go a long way to helping with the TV sound system. Our next item of business is to nominate and elect members to serve on the Special Legislative Management Committee. Do we have any nominations? Representative McCarthy, Representative Pierce.
Very good. Unrehearsed. We would like to nominate for this MLC ourselves, Michael Hurley, let's see, Julie Gottlieb, and Mr. Newberger.
So Representative McCarthy, Representative Pierce, Representative Hurley, Gottlieb, and Newberger. Is there a second? Representative Zezima. Any discussion on these members? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations to the members of the SLMC. We're going to take a quick recess and ask the SLMC to please go meet and put together the committees, come back and report to us. We'll stand in recess for the next few minutes. If peers would like to speak to the body.
Tom McCarthy, District 7.
Phil Piers, District 4.
The leadership for the SLMC has been decided upon. I'd like to announce that Michael Hurley will be chair.
Julie Gottlieb will be vice chair.
And as you're about to discover, Ray Newberger, usually never happens, but in Ray's case, will be secretary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations. Representative Newberger, would you please announce the committees?
Ray Newberger, District 6. Tom, don't feel bad about that. Most people do get choked up when they think of me or my name comes to mind. For legislative and administration, Bateson, Hurley, Ferentz, Iacono, McCarthy, Dean, Garskov, and Pierce. For finance, Ambrose, Durrell, Varian, McCullough, Newman, Gottlieb, Zezima, and Gerber. Public Works and Planning, Newberger, Orris, Tallman, Harrison, Georgiadis, Ambrose Jr., Solomon, and Wackerman. Education and Recreation, Way, Messina, Farnan, Lynch, Lee, Walk, McDermott, Vergara. Public Health and Safety, Perugini, Fatabine, sorry. Cargill, Sunman, Smay, Hochberg, Perham, and Gale. There you have it.
Thank you. I'd like to take another recess and have all the committees convene in separate corners of the room, and please elect leadership and report back. We stand in recess. 5 minutes, please. Eligibility or vesting rights in the town's existing pension system. The employee shall be required to contribute at least 4% of base salary to the plan and may contribute up to the maximum allowed by law. The town shall match the employee's contribution up to a maximum of 4% of base salary. The town's contribution shall not vest until the employee has been continuously employed for 5 years. Moved by Representative Dean, seconded by Representative McCarthy, and I understand that Mrs. Leffer is here from the Board of Education. Would you like to make a brief statement? For those of you that are new, since we haven't had committees, we're going to do presentations this evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ann Leffert. I'm the Director of Human Resources on the Board of Ed side. For those of you that have been on the RTM, this is the 5th time I'm bringing this pension language before you. We have 5 non-certified bargaining units, 2 certified bargaining units. For the purposes tonight, we're looking at the pension language and the pension language only. The 4 previous bargaining units, non-certified bargaining units, we have received approval from this body to move forward to change the pension from a defined benefit plan to this defined contribution plan. So that is what is on the agenda for tonight, is to change the pension language. This is something that the town had requested of the Board of Ed a number of years ago, and I believe all of you should have received a memo from me that gave some background on how contracts come before you. These non-certified Board of Ed contracts, the contract itself is not something for approval by this body. By State of Connecticut statute, that is the purview of the Board of Education, and this contract was approved by the Board of Education at the last meeting in a unanimous vote. So before you is the pension language and the pension language only to change that. I do believe that you all received a copy of the approved contract anyway, so you have that in front of you to take a look at that. Just some brief information about this bargaining unit. There are 231 members in this unit. Out of all of our non-certified units, there's more movement in and out of this bargaining unit than any other. We tend to see a number of our staff members on the paraprofessional side who, a great number of them have been with us for quite some time, but many of our new hires are certified as teachers, weren't able to find a teaching job, and so come into our ranks as a paraprofessional to gain some experience and knowledge about the educational system, and then are still looking for a certified teaching position afterwards. So we might see 15 to 20% of this bargaining unit turnover every single year, basically on our new hire side. So that's some background information on this particular bargaining unit. Short of that, I've given you some information on our actuarial report. Over time, looking like a 3.8% savings in the account. It's going to take some time to get there. Current bargaining unit members still remain in the town's current defined benefit contribution plan, defined benefit pension plan. So I'll leave it at that, and Madam Moderator, respond to any questions if there are any.
Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any further discussion from the body? Representative McCarthy.
Tom McCarthy, District 7. I would just like to say briefly, this is largely pro forma. We're not voting on the contract per se. The reason it's before this body is simply because anything related to the pension program comes before us for review. These are exactly like, as Ms. Leffert alluded to, the other contracts that become before us, no different. It's what this body's asked for in the past. I have no concerns at all about this resolution.
Anyone else? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address this item? Seeing none, All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. Item number 6, to consider and act upon the minutes of the regular monthly meeting held on October 26, 2015, moved by Representative Dean, seconded by Representative Ambrose. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Representative Pierce, Representative Lee, Representative McDermott, Representative Wackerman, Georgiadis, Representative Orris, Representative Vergara, Representative Fadbean, Representative Perham, Representative Gale, Representative Solomon, Representative Ambrose, and Representative Harrison. How's that? I don't know if that passes or not. 12? Okay. So we're good to go. Thank you very much. Item number 7. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Selectmen. Resolved that a system site lease agreement between the Town of Fairfield and SEFIA Holdings, LLC, for the purpose of erecting a photovoltaic electric generation system on the roof of the Jennings Firehouse at 600 Jennings Road for the sole benefit of the Jennings Firehouse, the term of the agreement being 20 years, be and hereby is approved. Moved by Representative Garskoff.
To take these as a whole, can we combine them?
It's you can, if you get a second. I mean, I don't know if people, seconded by Representative Dean. All in favor of combining, which items do you want to combine, Josh?
7, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
I'd love a motion to waive the reading of them. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Mr. Bowman, I understand you're here from, and Mr. Michelangelo from Public Works. Oh, we didn't vote on, I'm told we didn't vote on combining them. All in favor of combining the items, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Representative McCullough. Any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you.
Good.
Mr. Michelangelo.
Okay, I'll give a quick overview of how these projects are come to fruition, and Mr. Bowman will speak mainly to the other issues, the technical issues. And we get questions all the time that, you know, how does this work? It seems too good to be true, but it really is a good way of crafting these projects. So we get private companies, developers, to install solar arrays on our buildings or on our land, and we've done, between us and the school, we probably have a dozen of them behind us, and they were all crafted the same way. So for the company, the reason why they put up the capital, they install these projects on our property, and the way they're able to do these projects, which are hundreds of thousands of dollars of capital invested, there's a couple ways what's in it for them. Now, the power companies, both UI and CLMP, are required to purchase a certain amount. They can't make power, but they're required to purchase, I believe, 20% of their power through renewable resources. So they're sort of in a box where they are required to do it, but they can't produce it. So one of the ways they accomplish getting renewable energy is they have ZREC programs, Zero Energy Renewable Credits. They have a competitive credit program set up where different companies and projects and municipalities submit bids for these credits to enable these projects to get enacted, and it lets UI and CLMP accomplish their goal. So we're a UI town, they're our utility company. So these companies, and we deal mainly with Green Skies and Skyviews, so they submit these projects, and they've won the 5 projects that you have before you tonight. So it was a windfall. They did some homework, they did put together a good package, so they make money by selling those ZREC credits to UIs. That's a plus to them. Another thing that the private company gets, there's a federal tax incentive, which is now at the 30% level from, I believe, till the end of 2016, and that's 30% for commercial ones. Any of us could do it at our home, same thing for 10%. So it's federal law, whether in Connecticut or anywhere else. So they get a 30% credit on their initial investment. And also, they do sell electricity to us. We have to buy the energy, but we buy it probably about 2/3 of the market rate. So they're able to make money that way. So for their initial investment, they're able to recoup money in 3 different ways, and obviously it works for them, or they won't invest this large sum of money. So for the town, what's in it for us? We don't put any money down, no capital, 0 up front, and we purchase energy for the next 20 years at somewhere around 2/3 of the market rate. So instead of spending 17, 18, 19 cents for power generation and distribution from the UI, we pay 11 cents or 12 cents depending on how the deal is structured. So that's a winner for us. And finally, it enables us to buy, clean, renewable energy without being fossil fuel dependent. So we're accomplishing some of our internal goals, financially prudent, and let somebody else upfront the money. And the specifics of the project, Mr. Bowman knows more about the locations, the conditions, the intricacies of each of the projects if he'd like to speak.
Good evening. And so I also want to talk about the process a little more too. It's a reverse auction that's done twice a year. And the money to pay for it actually comes out of our utility bills. Every month there's a percentage of Conservation Load Management Fund that goes into a bank, and the money to pay for these ZRECs is coming out of that. So what we're trying to do here is get back the money that we're all putting into the bills, so it comes back to FERC for what was spent. And the proposal with the least cost wins. The lowest ZRECs, they're tentatively awarded by UI. The winning companies then have to submit proof of sufficient financial arrangements before they can, UI can further it. And then from there, the financial institution only works with proven vendors. The vendors must demonstrate an arrangement with the highest level of approved solar manufacturers, a Class 1 level, and that's the only ones they can work with, the ones that have proven success throughout the country. And the result of that also is that the Connecticut Green Bank, which is CFIA, has put together over $100 million in investment from private banks throughout the state. And they pool their resources. Not any one bank is loaning this money. As a result of that, they'll be able to offer an interest rate which is below market, which is another way they save money on these projects. When that is all put together, then PURE, the Public Utility Resource Authority of the state of Connecticut, has to approve the package. And then it comes back to us. In our process, basically, going back, so we had a competitive RFQ process to choose vendors and wound up with these 2 vendors, Green Skies and Skyview. One for the large installation, which is Green Skies, one for the small, which is Skyview's. The reason they were chosen, among others, was they had the most New England and Connecticut experience, which wasn't that much up to that point. And the second criteria is they had to guarantee that over 20 years its price that they charge us for electricity would be the same or less than the price we're paying now in 2015, which is pretty hard to do. And a lot of the vendors dropped out. They would not guarantee that. So we were left with actually these 2 vendors, and they're the ones we worked with. Now, what's the town's risk beyond that is, first of all, the roof has to be assessed to its long-term ability to host the solar program. If the roof is under warranty, the vendor must agree the solar system will not default the warranty. The roof is deemed unacceptable by the town, and the vendor can't proceed unless we or they fix the project. One of our projects at the town garage, it's the 1950s portion. Obviously, it's way old. The vendor itself is fixing the roof, so spending $50,000 to fix that roof so they can put the solar on. The other vendor's doing the same thing at Jennings Beach, the pavilion there. Part of it, when the roof there again doesn't have the support system, the vendor is paying to put the support system in. So there's a lot of ways around it. If none of that happens, the town hasn't paid for any yet. We might not do it if we had to pay to fix the roof unless it was on a schedule to fix. So it's worked out very well that way. The company, as Joe said, assumes the full design, financial, operation, maintenance responsibilities for the 20-year period. Again, the town is guaranteed to pay less for 20 years for market rate. But now if the company goes bankrupt or otherwise financially falls, the financial institution will bring in another qualified company to operate it. Or an option, the town could actually buy it for a predetermined amount in the power purchase agreement. The worst case is the company fails to produce power for 24 months, and the same options as above would occur. We could throw the vendor out, bring a new vendor in, the bank would either bring it in, or we could buy the program. After 20 years, the town has 4 options, really. We can renew the contract for another 2 5-year periods, or we can choose another vendor to operate the project. We can operate it ourselves, or we can tell the vendor to disassemble the system and remove it from the site. These systems seem to have a reliability of 30 years before they need to be replaced. So there's a possibility after 20 years that we could do it if we wanted to. If it didn't seem feasible, we just tell them to take it away. That's basically how the programs work. Now, between them, these programs will produce about 425,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a year. At today's rate, saving about $28,000 a year. And that's basically my part of the program.
And this has gone through the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. And the reason we are tonight is because the London agency, CFIA, which is also Connecticut Green Bank, quasi-state agency, one of the requirements is that because these systems will be on our property, there's a lease involved, so that's what you're going to be asked to do tonight, to approve the lease portion of this deal.
Did you want to add anything?
No, just any
Does
questions?
anybody have any questions? Representative Ambrose.
Peter Ambrose, District 1. I'd like to ask the town attorney a question, if I may, through you. Stanton, have you reviewed these leases, and are you satisfied that they're in the best interest of the town?
Yes, I am. And these are the same leases that we've been using, for the most part. They were reviewed in the past also, and I looked at these. The leases for all the sites are similar, except for the schedules.
And you're not concerned about any existing warranties with roofs and how they may be affected by, and I understand, I heard what was said, but you feel we're protected in that capacity?
Yes. Yes, from the way I understand it, the way these are constructed is they just sit on top of the roof. They don't penetrate the roofs. I think Mr. Bowman might be able to confirm that. So they don't affect the warranties.
But 90% of the time, that's right. There's occasional, they will penetrate the roof. Then they will need, much more protection. But none of these will penetrate. They just are weighted and sit on the roof.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you for the presentation. Is there any further discussion on any of these particular items? Seeing none. Any commentary from the public? Back to the body. All those in favor of approving items number 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Representative Farnan. Item passes. Thank you. Item number 12, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that Michael C. Tetro, First Selectman of the Town of Fairfield, be and hereby is authorized to expend $304,461 in the name and on behalf of the Town of Fairfield to purchase a CBRNE-equipped shallow water vessel to support Fairfield critical infrastructure. 75% of said purchase to be reimbursed by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, fiscal year 2015, Port Security Program grant, $228,346, and the remaining 25%, $76,115, to be funded by the revenue from the sale of the existing vessel and the fiscal year 2016 Police Department budget. Moved by Representative Hochberg, seconded by Representative Dean. Chiefs Liddy and McNamara are here to discuss this evening. Let them do the presentation.
And actually, also with us is Officer Jim Wiltsey. And before I even get started, Officer Wiltsey is one of our Marine officers who, this is his second grant that he applied for, and we've been granted. The first one was our current vessel from the Homeland Security Port Security grant of $480,000. something like that. So obviously not only doing the work as a Marine officer out there during the season, but also looking pretty hard to get some grant funding for the purposes of lessening the cost to the town. First of all, congratulations to all of you newly elected RTM members, and I look forward to many conversations with you. This is just the first of many, I'm sure. For those of you who are unaware, the Fairfield Police Department has probably around 50 years of presence on the water for the town of Fairfield. And we have our footprint through a variety of means. One of them is a large vessel, and as I said earlier, that vessel allows us to go into the deeper water, and many years ago we received a port security grant for that vessel. I think it was the same 75 and 25%, no, it was 100% funded through the grant. That's why Officer Wiltsey is here. So that was 100% funded through the grant. It replaced a large vessel that we had that was purchased by the town, and that was through Homeland Security. And the reason that Homeland Security provides this money is after September 11th, and probably even before that, the federal government looks at Homeland Security funding, and they look to buy down risk through a variety of different means. And they look at ports, when you talk about port security grants, they look at ports and other areas, not only close to New York City, but elsewhere, as some potential risks. So they look to disperse money into areas that they feel are going to buy down some risk. And they look at the town of Fairfield's marine presence on the water and established marine presence as the ability to invest some funding into our program in the event that we're required to assist them. So they're paying money to buy down the risk, mainly in the port of Bridgeport. So that's how we received the first vessel. Now, our second footprint in the water is a smaller vessel. And the smaller vessel that we have currently, and I think you have some paperwork on it, but that smaller vessel has been with us for just about 13 years. And that is a vessel that has served us well. However, probably within a year or two, we were looking to come forward to seek money from the town to replace that anyway. So while Officer Wiltsey was seeking the funding for that vessel, we were anticipating having to fund a new vessel. Now, that shallow water boat, or the boat, that smaller boat, allows us to go into some of the more shallow areas of town and allows us to get closer to shore and some of the more shallow water. So that's why we have the two boat operations. And at the same time, both boats are deployed for a variety of reasons, mainly for those of you who have enjoyed the fireworks. You'll see our presence out there with both of our boats as well as other vessels from surrounding towns. So here we go. We applied for the grant and we received the funding for the grant with a 25% stipulation that we invest from the town side of it. So that is why I am here asking for that. If there's any specific questions with regard to some of the operations, Officer Wiltsey would be able to answer those questions.
Questions for the Chief. Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, District 10. I totally support the purchase of this vessel. I think it's smart. I think seeking grant money for something like this is absolutely terrific. The department should be commended. I don't agree with the funding of this vessel, particularly the way it's being funded out of the police operating budget. And I'm considering making a motion that we take no action on this item tonight, refer it back to the Board of Finance for consideration, and that they look to fund this through the town's contingency, which I believe is well stocked. So I don't like, taking away police services or equipment. You have the whole list or the breakdown here, to go out and acquire an additional piece of capital for the police department out of an approved budget. So my question, through you, Madam Moderator, to the Chief is, all things being equal, would it be in our police department or a town's best interest to acquire this vessel but not have it funded through the operating budget? Because I see you're reducing 6 or 7 items here.
Yeah, I mean, look, we presented a budget at the budget time, obviously during the budget season, that did not account for a 25% reduction to fund this. But obviously, when we looked at it, we looked at, this is in the best interest of the town to come up with 25% somewhere. Now, where that comes from, obviously, these reductions to our budget are not something that we planned for. I mean, obviously, we put that forward, but if there was another funding stream that we could get that money from and maintain the budget the way that it is, obviously, I mean, that would be significant for us. The reason I stepped aside was to find out whether or not the delay would cause any issues with regards to grant acceptance. And I just wouldn't know when that would come forward before this body to make that determination.
Well, if I was to go forward with the motion, I would like to go through, again, the moderator to, I believe David Becker is here from the town Board of Finance. I believe the BOF is meeting tomorrow, and if I did put forth this take no action, refer back to the BOF, it could be added to the BOF agenda tomorrow by a member. I was wondering if Mr. Becker could speak to that.
Mr. Becker.
David Becker, Board of Finance. Yeah, tomorrow night we have a regular meeting. The next one after that would be January. It would require, if I'm correct, a 2/3 to add it. It is a regular meeting, so we could do that. I guess you would then get it really at the following meeting, yeah, at your December meeting, which is about 3 weeks from now.
Our December committee meeting is December 7th, and the regular meeting of the RTM is December 14th.
Thank you. So I feel comfortable enough to proceed with this, I guess, motion, which would be a motion to take no action on this item, to refer it back to the Board of Finance for hopefully tomorrow's meeting, and for them to rediscuss the item and to see if the funding of this vessel could be, or the remaining balance, through the town's contingency fund.
Is there a second? Representative McCarthy. Discussion on this item. Mr. Tetro.
Thank you. Funding this and using contingency funds to make the town match is something that was discussed at the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance before coming here, and it was something the chief and I talked about prior to it coming to any of the boards. There are two things. One, using contingency funds this early in the year is a tough bet in a sense that we have contingency for all those things that come up during the year. Now we have, and forgive me if there's somebody who remembers from the budget book what the contingency is, but I say it's approximately $400,000, and I can get the exact number for that. Realize the state has already cut municipal aid to the town of Fairfield by over $500,000. Realize that the state assembly and the governor are currently meeting in Hartford. That special session they're talking about, what they're going to do in that session to decide how much more they're going to cut from municipal aid. And that's all without having any snowfall yet. And for those of you that were around last winter, we had a $500,000 overage in our snow removal overtime account. So the concern is that's a lot of planning. We know we have to make up $500,000 as of today. We know we're going to have some amount more based on what comes out of the state assembly discussions and these budget adjustments. And that's without looking at anything that we might run over on in terms of snow removal. So that would be my caution in terms of going back. And this was the discussion we did have at each of the boards prior to it coming here. We chose not to do that and say it made more sense for the chief to make some adjustments in his budget because we have a number of unplanned things coming down the road. We think we'll make that contingency account rather lean.
Representative Hurley.
Michael Hurley, District 10. I respect the opinion of the first selectman, but I still plan to go forward with my motion because I think it's in the best interest of our town and of the town's public safety apparatus. I mean, you look at the items that are going to be cut. I think it's a mistake, and I hope that the body will support.
The further discussion on this item, Representative Gerber, then Representative Garskoff.
Bill Gerber, District 2. Madam Moderator, may I ask Representative Hurley a question? On this list, are there any specific ones you want to call out as really worrying you the most as to if they're cut might hurt the delivery of services? May I ask, Madam Moderator, Chief McNamara, is there anything on this list that by cutting will reduce your ability to deliver the services you currently deliver?
You know, when we put forth this list, obviously we made the determination when we put that forward that we would have to live without these items. So obviously I'm not going to do anything that's going to affect our delivery of public safety. But kind of irresponsible to do that. We had to find a way to come up with the 25%, and these are the decisions that we made. And we did have the discussions throughout that that these cuts were here, but you know, to affect our delivery of public safety. You know, we've had those discussions, and we've accepted the fact that to move forward with this opportunity at the moment, it was important for us to get that, and we would accept those cuts. Where that funding comes from moving forward is certainly not in my hands. I've made those decisions, and it's really in your hands now.
Well, for example, Madam Moderator, may I follow? Chief McNamara, so would you sell the existing vessel if you, regardless, or would you have preferred to keep it and use two vessels? No. Okay. I appreciate what Representative Hurley is doing. I think it's in the right spirit, but I believe that for Selectman Tetro's point is actually more important. We're going to need, I mean, we really need to keep a contingency fund for all of the things that we can't foresee, which invariably come up. So, and I assume that Chief McNamara would not have proposed these items if they would have had any impact on services. I believe exactly what he says, so I'm going to vote against this motion.
Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. Just, if I may ask the Chief a question, Madam Moderator. You had mentioned, Chief, you were going to check on the timing and make sure it was okay. If we did delay this for a month, whether that would affect the grant. Were you able to confirm that?
Yeah, the delay wouldn't affect, it would affect the ordering, it wouldn't affect the ability for us to get our funds. But I think it's important to note is that, you know, this isn't, I don't take these cuts lightly, so I don't want you to think like, hey, I can just all of a sudden find 25% of the budget moving forward. I mean, these are, this is funding. I don't want you to think that. What I want you to understand is that I wouldn't make significant cuts to the budget that are going to affect the delivery of public safety in the short term. But, you know, I don't want you to think like I present a budget and then lo and behold, I can always find money to kind of make other decisions. You all know when we prepare a budget, we have to be flexible enough to seize opportunities where they are, and that's kind of what we look to do. But I don't want to leave you the impression that any time I can just find 25% to fund other things.
But the delay till the dates that were discussed earlier would not affect the receipt of this at all. Thank you.
Representative Bateson, then Representative Wackerman, and Georgiitis. I'm going to get it eventually.
Thank you. Ed Bateson, District 1. Through you, Madam Moderator, to the first selectman. Contingency, I heard $400,000. I thought contingency was several million. Unless I misheard.
It's a question of definition. Each year for the last 2 years, we've broken out the total amount we reserve for contract settlements and how much we reserve for what's called normal contingency, for snowplow overtime, that type of thing. And I believe the number is about $450,000. That's the right ballpark if it's not the exact number in terms of what we have for normal contingency. So to take, we know we're basically have to make up $500,000 in the budget as of today. We know it's more than likely, unless somebody's got some information I'm not reading out there in the papers, that the state is short on money. They are going to have to cut the budget, and they've already crossed the line about not protecting municipalities or keeping us whole anymore, so they've done it once. I fully expect they will do it again. And then we still have the entire year of our budget to run on. Part of our discussion when the chief first came to me with this was, can we get the money in your budget, and will that affect service levels? And if that had been a service level question, we would have had a much different discussion at that point.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to support Representative Hurley's motion. I hear you, Gary. I know you don't take these cuts lightly, neither do I. What caught my attention on these things is I want the boat. If push came to shove, like you, if I was sitting in your chair, I probably would have made this decision too, as opposed, to secure the funds. There's several things in here, though, that, concern me about reducing, such as, special officers, ammunition. I want you guys to have bullets. I really do. So when I see cuts like that, it concerns me. I really think that, if there's no harm in the timeline, refer it back to the Board of Finance. Can we pay for it? Yeah, certainly we can. I think when I sit up here, sit in these chairs, what I look at is the level of service I'm receiving. If I'm cutting something or reducing something that is quantifiable, such as you've done here, it starts to cause me concern. I want to see you continue to maintain those services and those level of supplies that you have. And in doing so, if we can fund this through contingency, I'd like to do that. If the Board of Finance sees otherwise, I'll respect that. But I will support this tonight.
Representative Wackerman.
Karen Wackerman, District 7, through you, Madam Chairman. Chief McNamara, there's conversation here about reducing the budget, your budget, by 25%, but that doesn't include the $30,000 you'll get for selling the vehicle, right? The other boat. So you're really only reducing it by maybe $46,000. Is that right? Am I reading that correctly? That you get funds from?
What that chart will show you is how we come up with the 25% fee. And included in that is the $30,000 sale of the vessel. And then the second line I just want to point out is in-kind allowance for expenses related to the purchasing. The federal government will at times look towards what you do in kind, and they will account that in-kind service oftentimes and put a dollar amount next to that. That's our estimate, that $6,400 will be in kind. We're looking at ways to try and increase that. So that's just the model to show you how we can come up with that 25%.
Thank you. So in effect, it's really only $40,000 or so of reductions from your budget that are needed for this. And I would trust your judgment in that, and I know that you want to keep us all safe, so I will be opposing the motion as well. Thank you.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Madam Moderator, I'd like to address the RTM, specifically Representative Hurley. He was talking specifically about public safety, and if this sets a precedent that public safety can be tapped, can be used as a reason to tap into the contingency every single time. That might be something that we would like to avoid, because my understanding that we've avoided maybe paving roads, a variety of things over the past few years. That impacts public safety. There are a lot of things that impact public safety. So if this is going to be a precedent, I don't think that that is a precedent we would like to set. So therefore, and I do believe that Chief McNamara would never put the town in jeopardy. So I would also oppose Representative Hurley's motion.
Representative McCarthy, then Representative Dean.
Tom McCarthy, District 7. I think we all agree that the boat is an acquisition we need to have. It's a good investment for the town. And Chief McNamara has identified items in his budget he's in effect willing to trade for that boat. And if you look at those items, as Mr. Hurley and Mr. Bateson pointed out, I'm not sure he ought to be making that trade. Now, the question is, what bucket does this come out of? That's really only question. So I think it's worth another look by the Board of Finance to evaluate this. Not necessarily that they'll change their decision, but I think it's a close enough call here. It's a jump ball. Let's send it back for the small amount of delay that this will represent. I think it's worth another look. And if the Board of Finance comes back and says, no, there's too many things out there that potentially could happen, snow's not the least of which, that's fine. I'll respect their decision.
Representative Dean.
Representative Dean, District 3. I have not found our police chief to be an alarmist in any manner, and very methodical in his thinking and planning. And in fact, the first selectman, when he got up, he was answering questions that I was formulating to ask, such as, who did you talk to first about this? Where did you bring it up? How did you talk about the monies? Where was it going to come from? Moreover, maybe it is time to sound the alarm a little bit here. When I'm looking at this vessel that is currently 13 years old and has major stress cracks in the hull, it has experienced use in extreme conditions over the last 13 years. Navigation equipment is outdated and sometimes inoperable. I don't know, folks. You know what? We're a beach community. We have Penfield, Jennings, Sasko. I just don't understand why we would start grappling over this amount when our police chief has worked really diligently trying to make the numbers work and look at what he can go without to make this a public safety issue as far as making sure we have a operable vessel. I just don't see why we're throwing this back to the Board of Finance when, in fact, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, also elected officials that we trust, their financial judgment, it has looked at this and talked about it. So I just, in good conscience, after reading the problems with this vessel, could support putting it back, throwing it back, and being reconsidered to be spent from some other fund. I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Other questions? Representative Pierce.
Phil Pierce, District 4. I've thought a lot about this motion, and I think Representative Hurley's heart is in the right place. But I think given the great uncertainties about state aid during this budget season, and given the great uncertainties about the winter and the amount of snow plowing we're going to need, I don't think, as a matter of policy, we should be tapping into contingency. So I'm going to be voting against this motion. I really did think about it a lot. And I do think Michael Hurley's, Representative Hurley's heart is in the right place here. But I don't think we're going to suffer any loss in services, and I don't think, as a matter of policy, we should be dipping into contingency right now. Thanks.
Any further questions from the body? I apologize. If the Board of Finance does not take the item up tomorrow, will it affect the grant funding if this is held off and not voted until January? You may have answered that before, and I believe I stepped out.
Yeah, that's why I stepped over there. My understanding is it won't affect, it'll affect ultimate delivery date when we place the order, but it won't affect the funding of the grant itself.
Okay, so if the Board of Finance doesn't take action on this tomorrow and doesn't hear it till the end of December, and then it doesn't come back to the RTM until the end of January, you're not in any danger of losing the grant?
Yeah, my understanding is we won't lose the grant. It's just pushing
You're
back
going to
the order
delay
date.
ordering it, which is something you would rather do, but...
Yeah.
Okay. Rather not do, obviously. Okay.
Correct, yes. The
Represent-
sooner we order the boat, obviously, the better. The funding stream from the federal government won't be as affected by any delay.
Understood. Thank you. Representative Lee.
Representative Lee, District 9, Madam Moderator, through you to Chief. When do you have to order that? Will you have that boat this year? If we order it now. If we order it in 2 months, not so much. Okay. Does it, if we don't order the boat, does that affect the sale of our boat to Bridgeport? Are they still going to want it if they have to wait 3 months, or do they need a boat this year? I mean,
Yeah, we don't, we act, just to clarify, we don't actually have a buyer of the boat, so that boat will be for sale for anyone in the audience or on TV who would like a good boat, although it's already been mentioned its shape. Yeah, we do not yet have a buyer, so that's it. I think our plan is when we move forward to sell that boat and then order the new one, and with anticipation that the new boat will be in service sometime in the beginning of the season or close to the beginning of the season, boating season this year.
one more question. If we decide to, this measure is voted on, and we kick it back to the Board of Finance, the Board of Finance meets tomorrow, and they say, no. Can we get that back on the agenda for the 14th? And how bad does that hurt your schedule? All right. I don't like this at all, because it sounds to me like we don't have a contingency to spend. I mean, I'm not the greatest math guy, but if we have to come up with $500,000 and we got to have $450,000 in contingency, doesn't sound good. But if we do have an alternative to get it back, we can send it back to the Board of Finance so they can reject it a second time, I suppose.
Further comments from the body on, can the clerk please read back the exact wording of the motion? Can you use the mic, Beth?
To take no action tonight and refer back to the Board of Finance to determine if the 25% could be funded from the town contingency fund.
All right, and this is going to take a 1-minute break. I just want to confer with the town attorney on the procedurally. Thank you for indulging me. I believe Michael Hurley has a revision to his amendment, his motion.
Michael Hurley, District 10. So I'm going to amend my motion, so it will be a motion to postpone the item to a date certain so that our town's Board of Finance can re-examine the purchase of this vessel and whether the $36,115 currently scheduled to be removed from the Fairfield Police Department's fiscal year 2015-16 budget be considered from contingency?
I believe if you want the RTM to still own the motion, you should just postpone this to a date certain with the RTM, with the Board of Finance knowing that we want them to reconsider this. You don't need to have that in your motion.
So we'll just postpone to a date
certain, the December meeting.
to a date certain of the December meeting.
Okay, who seconded the
meeting.
motion? Okay, are you okay with that? All right, even though it technically belongs with the body, but that's just a little bit cleaner. All right, so that's the motion, to postpone this until the December meeting. Representative Garskoff.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Josh Garskoff, District 5. Mr. Hurley, I think I just heard you say something that we want to kind of put in the record. I don't know if it got in the record just now. Not necessarily as part of the motion, but what's the number that you're asking them to reconsider? Because I think I'm in agreement with what you're saying.
I think my math was incorrect, thank you,
Oh.
Representative
I'm not
Karshkov. So the 25% required municipal contribution is in the amount of $76,115, of which is a sale of an existing vessel, which is estimated at $30,000, which would leave a remaining balance of $46,115 to come out of the police department's operating budget for the current fiscal year.
So the number, you're not asking them to reconsider the entire amount, you're asking them to reconsider a portion of that
The $36,115. 46.
Thank you, that's what I wanted to confirm.
Representative Way. On the motion to postpone.
Carol Way, District 5. Actually, I do believe it is $36,425 because you have the $30,000 for the sale of the existing vessel, and you have $6,425 which is in kind. So, in kind is in kind. It's not actual money.
Can we agree on a number? Representative Garskoff.
Josh Garskoff, District 5. I'm not necessarily going to support this motion, but just for the help of getting the numbers out here, I think what we're saying is there's $30,000 estimated for the sale of the vessel, there's $64.25 for in-kind allowance, and I believe $9,000 in anticipated savings. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, that this money is anticipated anyway and is not being taken out of the budget, and that would total roughly $45,000 of the $75,000, which I think is maybe where Mr. Hurley was headed, but maybe I'm... Okay. Chief, is that money coming... Is that 9,000 anticipated savings? Is that money that's already saved or that you're hoping to save?
No, that is part of the discussion. Probably a bad word to say anticipated savings in special line, but that's where we would anticipate gathering $9,000. It's not necessarily we know now whether we're going to save that money or not. That would look towards reworking some of our footprints with our special officers.
All right.
Thank you. So that brings us to 36,425 off of the 76, which is roughly the roughly 40,000, right?
Okay. I'm going to move this along and to tell you that the motion on the table is to postpone to a date certain, the December meeting. If this passes, I would ask Representative Hurley to please reach out to the Chairman of the Board of Finance and be specific about the amount that you would like them to consider. I really think procedurally this is the best way to do it. It'll be noted in the minutes of what you wanted. Go ahead, Representative Hurley.
This is a motion that the body is voting on, so I think it needs to be reflected in that motion, and I think that it needs to be referred back to the Board of Finance if it passes. I don't think it should be through a postponement and then me calling Tom Flynn. I don't. That's not the
Do
business.
you want the
of this
dollar
body.
amount in the motion to postpone?
Yes.
What is the dollar amount?
As I said, 46,115.
The motion is to postpone this item to the December meeting so that the Board of Finance can reconsider. Read the number again, I'm sorry.
46,115.
Okay, that's the motion. Any further comments from the body? Any members of the public that wish to speak to this item? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Peter Ambrose.
Yes.
Ed Bateson.
Yes.
Mary McCullough. Keith Varian. Bill Gerber.
No.
Tim Lynch.
No.
Eric Newman.
No.
Cindy Perham.
No.
Heather Dean.
No.
Alex Durrell.
No.
Alexis Harrison. Robin Orris. Julie Gottlieb. Jen Hochberg. Phil Pierce. Liz Esma. Josh Garskoff. Ruth Smay. Carol Way. Jay Wolk. Matthew Ambrose. Hannah Gale. Ray Newberger. Janice Solomon. Tom McCarthy. Mark McDermott. Jill Vergara. Karen Wackerman. Hank Ferentz. Pamela Iacono. Christine Messina. Peter Tolman. Brian Farnan. Drew Georgiadis. Ken Lee. Bill Perugini. Paul Fatterbean. Michael Hurley. Eric Sunman.
The motion to postpone fails 29-9-1. We're back on the main motion. Is there any further discussion on approval of the boat through the grant? Seeing none, any comments from the public? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item passes. Item number 13, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that the First Selectman, Michael C. Tetro, be and hereby is authorized on behalf of the Town of Fairfield to expend up to $250,000 to fund a community development block grant disaster recovery, CDBG-DR, Tranche 2 project entitled Riverside Drive Coastal Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Study. 100% of said project costs to be reimbursed by federally funded disaster recovery community grant block. Brian Carey is here from the Conservation Department, and Joe Michelangelo.
I'll give a quick overview before turning it over to Brian Carey. Following Storm Sandy, one of the things we did was seek all avenues for funding, including FEMA, Army Corps of Engineer, Connecticut DEEP, Connecticut DEMIS, National Fish and Wildlife, and one of the things that was, to our surprise, one of the most successful programs to obtain funds was the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Resiliency Funds, and that's federal funds through Department of Housing and locally through HUD or vice versa. And so far, thus far, previously, we've gotten 7 such grants that total about $7 million, and you may have heard these, 2 of them for Penfield, the sewer repair, our microgrid project, WPCF hardening, Pine Creek culverts. So we've had success with this program almost as much as any other program through grants. The next 2 that we've applied for and got awarded were a couple planning grants for some studies, beach nourishment, and a Riverside Drive area study. So I'll let Brian Carey speak of those specifically, and I believe the first one is the $250,000 one.
Thank you for having me. So just wanted to come talk to you briefly about this. These were both approved through the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. These are non-matching grants, meaning they're fully reimbursed by HUD. So there really is no cost to the town other than the labor to administrate the grant itself. The first grant is for a coastal resiliency plan that's going to be looking at what we have described as the Riverside Drive corridor. There's been some talk about elevating the roadway in that area, but also replacing the existing culvert dike system that is right down over Turney Creek on Riverside Drive. It is in need of repair. The hope is that this grant will also pay for a feasibility study and a design to look at that and future permitting as a future capital project that would come back in front of this board. But that is part of the town's critical flood infrastructure along that area. So we're going to take a holistic look at the whole area and improvements that could be made to make the area more resilient to coastal storms, future coastal storms, and also future coastal sea level rise, both of which are needed in that area. The second grant that we applied for and received was for $100,000 for a beach engineer study to look at re-engineering the existing.
I'm sorry, we're only on the first grant.
Yeah,
so we didn't
I was gonna
combine
ask you.
them. So if we could just hold off on that one.
Yep.
No, please. Are there any questions on this particular? Did you have more to add on this one?
No, I can answer questions though.
Does anybody have any questions on this particular item? Representative Bateson. You want to combine?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Through you to the Director of Conservation, or Joe. Currently, is there any flood protection on Riverside? I'm assuming this is Riverside from Turney going up to the Post Road.
Yeah, it's basically down to South Benson Marina. The design, the study area that was referenced in the grant is basically from the Post Road down to South Benson Marina up South Benson Road. There is drainage infrastructure in that area. There's a dike system that runs not over Turney Creek, but also what's called Oyster Marsh. When you walk back behind the Riverside Drive open space access area back to Ash Creek, and there's actually dike structure that runs back through that area as well. This study would look at areas that potentially are compromised, and that would be assessed as part of the entire study.
I'm under the impression that that specific area of Riverside, there is no flood protection for the houses on Riverside.
No. No, again, there's a dike system on Riverside, basically, that runs down on top of Turney Creek and then behind Riverside Drive in the open space area.
Riverside.
Yes.
So there's no protection to the houses directly on.
No, I mean, I'd have to show you on the map, but areas on that dead-end road and south that abut Ash Creek directly are not protected. But areas on the other side of Riverside, on south of Riverside, going towards South Benson Road and towards the access to the marina, there is the road, there is a dike in that area.
Okay. I just want to make sure that this study is geared towards flood protection? You mentioned drainage, or is it a mixture of both? And if so, where do your priorities lie in this study?
Well, basically, when we go out to RFP or RFQ to secure the contractor, we'll have a top 10 list. This is also being done through coordination with the Flood and Erosion Control Board. So there's a bunch of items to hit, but it's some of the critical infrastructures. Looking at the existing tide gates that cross Turney Creek, that would be the #1 priority in the mind of the Conservation Department. But the study's also going to look at weaknesses, and they're going to come back and tell us what we need to address in the long term to basically protect houses that are vulnerable to future flooding. So it's not, there may be things that come out of the study that we weren't necessarily anticipating. That's the intent, is to kind of get a holistic look at how to better protect ourselves. And I mean, that could be a number of different facets that they'd come back with.
Madam Moderator, through you to Joe. Joe, roughly, what's the flood elevation of Riverside in that area currently? If there is flood protection, what's it at? 11, 13?
Well, the bridge at Riverside Drive, so when you come into Post Road, probably around 800 feet, there's a bridge there which has tide gates there. That's probably, and once I'd estimate, it's probably around around 12. So during Storm Sandy, the Ash Creek came all the way over there and came back. And when it comes up Turney Creek, that's the conduit that gets the water all the way to the Circle Diner there. It's coming all the way up there and even to the Stop and Shop. So even though that did provide protection during Storm Sandy, not the level of protection that we'd like. Fortunately, those areas weren't flooded going back there, but there's quite a bit of area that it would flood going back there. And if you could picture, if I had a monster truck, I could go from Vinnie's Ale House now and drive down Riverside, cut across the open space property, go across the marina, and go to the Jennings Beach Dune. So there's a swath of town land that I just described that we totally own, totally in control of, that we could fortify the east bank of Fairfield pretty good along that stretch there. And then, of course, we have Jennings, so that gets the Jennings Beach Dunes. So if we build our protection, that gets us pretty far over there. And then if we block the inlets like Turney Creek and the Oyster Creek area there, if we penetrate as many of the holes as possible, we're a long way to making a dent in part of the problem.
Good job. Thank you. I'll be supporting it.
Any further comments or questions? Thank you. Any further discussion from the body on this item? Seeing none, any members of the public? Back to the body. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Item passes unanimously. Item number 14, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that First Selectman Michael C. Tetro be and hereby is authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to expend up to $100,000 to fund a community development block grant disaster recovery CDBG-DR Tranche 2 project entitled Fairfield Engineered Beach Study. 100% of said project costs to be reimbursed by a federally funded disaster recovery community development block grant.
Sorry about jumping ahead before they're just real excited about these projects. So this project's actually, it's something that's been a problem not just for the town of Fairfield but other towns. After Hurricane, not just Irene and Sandy, there was deficiency noted with reimbursement for multiple towns in the area regarding damage that occurred to the beach structures themselves. There's actually a FEMA regulation that requires the beaches be constructed at a point in time to a design criteria that is set by FEMA. None of the towns in the state of Connecticut met that requirement. And what this study looks to do is look at the beaches and go forward in a manner that will evaluate the beaches and see how it fits into that design criteria and come up with a maintenance plan going in the future. So that if there is a catastrophic storm like Irene or Sandy or worse, that when the town would have to go back and reconstruct those beaches, that we would meet the requirements for 75% federal match. At this point, anytime there's damage done to our town beaches, the town would be 100% liable for the reimbursement costs. So when the study is completed, it may or may not require additional work to meet that standard. The question is, it's mostly surveying work and maybe some beach grading that could be associated with the final product at the end of the day. So this would look at all town-owned beaches, and it would deliver a report for us that we could actually go out to bid with at a time in the future to meet those requirements.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Carey? Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. Through you to Mr. Carey. I heard you say this, that most towns in Connecticut don't have, I'll say, engineered beaches. Are other towns moving to this now, too, to engineer their beaches and do these types of surveys?
As most of the body is aware, I am new to the town on May 1st, but this is a project that I did lead and complete in the town of Stratford for the Short Beach complex. The only reason why it didn't get done this summer, right before I left, I had a bid out, was because the piping plover was on the beach and it prevented any work to be done during the endangered bird season. So yes, this is something that is critical, and most towns are trying to address it. But it is something that has come up after Irene and Sandy, and I don't know of any towns in the entire state that have met this criteria.
The criteria of an engineered beach?
That's right.
Okay. I see where we're going with this, and through you, Madam Moderator, to the First Selectman. I agree with, in concept, what we're doing here. My fear is that once we start taking, let's say we engineer Sasko. I know Sasko right now is just basically for town residents. My fear is if I start taking federal money and that becomes a federally subsidized engineered beach, and then several years later we have another storm and we replenish it, then are we, are they going to come in and say, oh, well, now when people fill out their beach permit application, out-of-town residents, they're eligible for all beaches because you took all these funds?
Right off the top of my head, Representative, I don't know the answer to that. At this point, I think we're just looking at the study, but I think that's a good question. Before we spend money on the engineering, we perhaps might want to look at that. However, in terms of Jennings Beach and Penfield, some of those that we had some serious erosion problems. This is one of the key steps in terms of getting and qualifying for a 75% reimbursement from FEMA to replenish our beaches after a storm like this. It was immensely frustrating after Storm Sandy, where we had such significant damage, to hear that from FEMA that if we'd been asking for replenishment dollars all along, we could get it, but because we only asked for them once every 50 years or so, we couldn't get it because we weren't engineered to do that. The beaches, as much as the beaches in Connecticut aren't, it's my understanding that a lot of the beaches along the Atlantic coastline are, and that's why they get money back from FEMA after storms to get their sand replenished.
Okay, so just by accepting this study, accepting the funds for this, you see no risk in this?
Not in just doing the study, but we can confirm that too. I would think, to your point, we need to clarify before we spend any money on actually engineering the beach.
Which is not a given under this. The $100,000 is just to do the study.
Just the study.
Okay, thank you. I'll be supporting it.
All right, but just also to clarify, Joe, if you could make sure we get that answer too. We might as well get it now, so we know what we're doing.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Carey? Question? Representative Georgiadis.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I'd like to ask a question. In the Fairfield Engineered Beach Study under background, I was wondering about the pumping impact. I live in this district, and after Hurricane Sandy, the Army Corps of Engineers came in, and if there had been an engineered dune there or something, they would have completely decimated to put that pumping station in. So I'd like to know, would that, if it's an engineered beach, if that would be precluded, and we can no longer do that. Also under item 3, detailed description of the proposal, says something about a sand grain size. I know you often dredge the canal, and you put all the dredged sand onto the beach at Penfield, and I was wondering if that also would be precluded, because then the town, what they've done for years and years, would that also be precluded? So I'd like that to be addressed. I don't know if that's now or after we do the study, but if you could address that. Thank you very much.
Now, what we did during Sandy, for those of you that aren't aware, I know Drew lives right in the immediate area there, we set up some pumps all along the beach area to pump the water out. So one of the worst cases was basically in front of Penfield, where we set up the pump in the lots across the street, pumped it onto the beach, and you could picture that the large amount of water where it discharged created a big void at the end. I think that's what representatives talking about. So that was it was maybe the size, maybe it was 30 by 30 area. That was a direct impact of the evacuation. DEP, we knew we did that. It was a factor of the price we had to pay to get the water out of there, and if we had to do it again, this wouldn't preclude us from doing that. The other point was that Lantern Point. We had to set it up at the end of Reef Road too. So that's where, by nature of our activities, we had to do a little damage to do a lot of good. When the way we were forced to because of this situation with the engineered beaches, and we're only allowed to put sand above the coastal jurisdiction line, one of the things we were forced to do, which is basically the high tide line, all our spoils from our dredge projects, we had to put basically above the water line, and eventually it does filter down and it does some good to the beach over there. So in the future, with our engineered beaches, we'd probably do something similar. We most likely, it would be a coincidence if the material we got from Southport Harbor or Pine Creek or the Marina Channel, I think it would be too much of a coincidence if that was perfect for the beach itself as far as grain size and stuff. But we could still use that for beneficial use in the dry area of the beach, and then we have to import some, specific beach sand that meets the exact criteria for anything we put basically from the high tide line down, which is the tougher part of the project.
Any further questions? Representative McCullough.
Good evening, Representative McCullough, District 1. Through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Carey and/or Mr. Michelangelo. What is the beginning time of the study for each item of 13 and 14, and when's the conclusion, and when can this body expect a report on the resolution of both of the studies?
We just have to sign contracts with the state for selectmen, which was approved in the last meeting. So I'm hoping to get, we're going to go out to RFQ for both of these projects at the same time. So a start date would probably be somewhere in end of January, February, with the completion with 9 to 12 months. The coastal resilient, not to back up, but the coastal resiliency one will have more of a public outreach portion, while as the engineered beach, it's really the specific design criteria, and you're really looking at the erosion and the geometry of the beach and how that interacts with the fetch coming off Long Island Sound, which is the wave action. So there's not as much play. There would be a public aspect of that input once before we did the work, just to let everyone know going forward. But basically 9 to 12 months.
Any further questions? Representative Way.
Carol Way, District 5. To Mr. Carey, through the moderator. In terms of, I understand that this is just for the study. When you were in Stratford, you talked about you were actually trying to put a study into action. Were you able to get additional funding for that, or how was that to be funded?
It was actually funded through the operating budget, because when the study came back, the amount of work that needed to be done wasn't that great. So that, I would say, that would would be something we'd look at after we had this study. So we weren't that far off from meeting the design criteria to begin with. So we were in a good situation. But I would say part of the study would be coming up with costs. We'd ask the engineer to task us with costs to see what the cost benefit would be of going forward the project. So we'd have all that information available to us for planning purpose. So I would assume at some point in the future, depending on the cost we may or may not be coming here, might be something that could be funded through the operating budget. I just don't know, because how far you are from meeting that specific FEMA design criteria. But yes, in Stratford, I think the bid as received with the materials was less than $50,000 for Short Beach.
Any further questions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve? Representative Ambrose, seconded by Representative Lee. Is there any further discussion from the body? Any comments from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Representative Bateson, abstentions. Item passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 15. To hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Finance. Resolved that Michael C. Tetro, First Selectman of the Town of Fairfield, be and hereby is authorized to expend $18,000 to lease an electric vehicle, purchase and install a charging station at Jennings Beach, purchase 2 electronic charging stations from United Illuminating, one of which will be relocated, and purchase clean energy promotional items such as LED bulbs, said funds to be 100% reimbursed by a Clean Energy Communities Program grant. Moved by Representative Gottlieb, seconded by Representative Bateson. Mr. Bowman, you have a presentation for us? Sure. Welcome back. I apologize you had to sit through all that.
Basically, this is a grant that came to the town as a result primarily of the Clean Energy Task Force actions in promoting photovoltaic on various households, doing surveys, getting hundreds of households actually to install them, promoting electric vehicles, and doing different things that are promoting green energy throughout the town. So the result of $18,000 is, again, 100% grant, and propose to use it as to lease the first electric vehicle the town has for 36 months for about $4,000. This is a test. It's a plug-in one. We can just plug it into the side of the building. To relocate the 2 electric charging stations. UI put 2 electric charging stations in for us, one at Sherman Green and one at the railroad station. And the one at the railroad station isn't used much. Sherman Green is used very good. They were notified us going to take them out because it was just a study. We wanted to see how it worked. I mean, I don't know what the point of putting them in was. Anyway, with this grant, we can purchase both of those electric charging stations. They cost about $12,000 each. We can get them both for about $6,700 in this case because they're already installed. We might move one of them to a different location from the railroad station. The rest of it is things like buying LED bulbs, which they had one day that with UI, they sold UI these bulbs at the Home Depot. They would do things like that again. So it's basically just a number of things like that to continue to promote clean energy.
See another number of questions. Representative McCarthy. Then Representative Hurley. Way Gottlieb.
Through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Bowman. Just to confirm, these are electric charging stations and not electronic. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I'd like to move that we adjust the wording of the resolution to reflect electric as opposed to electronic charging stations.
Is that acceptable to everyone? Signify by saying yes. Yes. Thank you.
Michael Hurley, District 10, through you, Madam Moderator, to Mr. Bowman. Could you just clarify for me, how many of these charging stations do we have in town, and where are they located again?
Let's see, the town has a charging station in Sherman Green, and one at the railroad station on the Mill Plain Road lot. Also, there's one going in at the new recreation building on the Old Dam Road as part of the solar project. There's also one that the two of them have installed at Riverfield School as part of the construction project. We're looking at putting another one at Jennings Beach, again, part of a solar project. And what I'm trying to do is, with our solar projects around, trying to make the installer add an electric charging station as part of his project so it doesn't cost us anything. There are some private ones around, like at Whole Foods also, but we could probably have 5 or 6 in the next few years.
Just a follow-up question to you or to the First Selectman. Any plans to have greater geographic dispersion of these charging centers, Stratfield section of town, Southport? I don't know if the First Selectman could speak to that.
Well, I did forget, Fairfield Woods Library also has one. And again, our distribution problem has only been where the town has to own the land. Wherever we own the land, they're putting a photovoltaic in, that's where we're adding the charging stations.
So I guess you have one on that side of town. So in terms of Southport, are there any considerations, plans, anything that either you or the First Selectman are thinking about?
Again, at this point, unless we're putting solar in, and there is no Southport solar possibilities that I can think of, because we're not paying for these stations. We're having the contractor put them in as part of the project. So I don't know of anything in Southport right now.
Okay. Do you want to add anything?
Up to this point, we've been following Mr. Bowman's guidelines, and specifically because we can tie them into solar installations, there's no cost. We get it for free, it's installed for free, we've been able to use that, and that kind of helps us leverage the use of electric vehicles around town. As we get more, we'll and have the ability to put in more, and as electric vehicle usage picks up, you certainly will see more of these, and we'll be able to do more in terms of balancing that out. I think your point about making sure they're geographically balanced is very well taken. You'll notice also when you look at the stations, right now, any car with any fuel can park in the electric vehicle spot. In time, we may reserve those specifically for electric vehicles, but right now there aren't enough electric vehicles out there to cross that line. We don't want to use up parking specifically in some place like Fairfield Woods yet. But in time, we'll make those dedicated spots for electric vehicles, but we're kind of trying to manage that transition and kind of ease into that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Way, then Representative Gottlieb.
Carol Way, District 5. Have I missed something in the past that we voted on? We don't have solar down at Jennings Beach at this point, do we?
Not yet, but you approved the project there. When it goes in, there will be a charging station.
Okay. In terms of a charging station, though, does it make sense to have that in a flood zone?
Probably not, but we can get it for free. We'll put it there anyway.
I mean, perhaps, you know, some other place where we have solar might be a better choice.
Well, we're trying to do it where we have solar. So.
No, I understand, but we are going to have solar in many, many places now.
Right.
I just think maybe considering the idea of, you know, it being in a flood zone is maybe not a good idea. But just a question.
It's not the best idea, but it's only a problem when there's a flood, so for the most part, we'll be all right.
Representative Gottlieb, thank you. My questions were asked by Representative McCarthy and Hurley. Does anybody have any further questions? Representative Bateson.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ed Bateson, District 1. I just want to clarify. We approved solar for Jennings? You guys remember? You have it, Tim? No. Solar array.
Jennings Beach.
The pavilion down
A year
there?
ago, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I must have missed that meeting. I don't remember that one.
Well, there's like some 20 different projects, so it does get confusing after a while. You get 5 at a time every 3 or 4 months. So.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Is there any further discussion by the body? Seeing none, any discussion from the public? Back to the body. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Representative Farnan. The item passes. The last item on the agenda, and I do have a couple housekeeping things too to go over before you pack up. To consider and act upon any other matters presented to said meeting in which may be properly acted upon the rules of the representative town meeting. Seeing none. Three things. Number one, the probate judge has asked if anybody's interested in ringing the bell for the Salvation Army to please see either Ruth Smay or Ray Newberger. Second thing, there's a informational meeting, learning session for Robert's Rules for any of you who are interested this Wednesday at December 3rd. Is that right? Is that this Wednesday? Second. Roger Ledlow Middle School, 7:30 in the team room. If you could just give me a heads up that you're coming so I can let Jeff Steele know how many people to expect. And the last thing is, please go to the town website and look on the RTM page and make sure that all of your information, contact information, was entered correctly into the computer. And if anyone needs the link who has not completed the written form to just go directly into the computer system and enter in the information, let me know. I can forward that to you. Any other matters? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Representative McCarthy, Representative Dean, thank you all very much.